everybody! Welcome to Hamster's Hobby Hang, Cities Reforged Edition. Let's get some of our tunes going here. Hello, hello! Welcome all. Look at this little leaf I've got. I love it when I get a new overlay. Thank you, Letitia. A fun themed overlay. Oh, I got it in the other corner too. Incredible. I've got my own little Tudor hamster cage. First of all, thank you everybody for all of the support of this campaign so far. I mean, what a thrill. We are cooking with gas. It's very exciting and always fun to see it kick off with such a bang after all our hard work, so thank you. It's been a fun week getting this thing rolling. I am a little sniffly, so sorry in advance for some sneezes and whatnot. I suspect when I played a game of Warhammer during the kids' summer camp, maybe I picked up something there. There were a lot of kids at that shop, which is fantastic, but that might have been when I got something. Hamster, you have a captive audience, so it's time for your definitive top 5 favorite Arby's Sandos. Oh, man. For those that don't know, we have had a lot of Arby's conversations on this stream over the past 5 years. For one reason or another. I gotta say, top 5 is just the classic beef and cheddar with just 5 different levels of cheese, I'll be honest. Have it light, have it extra, have it even more. You know? That's my go-to, is that beef and cheddar. With the classic sauce on top. Oh, man. You know? It's one of those places I have one order. You get the curly fries, you get the beef and cheddar, you sub the drink for a Jamocha shake. You know? When I think Arby's, that's all I think of. Is that order. What in the heck is Roy Rogers? I'm from the upper Midwest. I haven't had any Roy Rogers. I do love a French dip. I haven't had the Arby's French dip, but I do love a French dip. Yeah, thank you, Finley. Definitely, if anyone is new here, join the Discord. I paint here every Thursday. You're always welcome to ask painting questions, but also tag me at Hamster in the Discord with questions. But our community is also super awesome and supportive and is always helping each other out. So click that link and join if you're not a part of it yet. I know, now I want to know Roy's. Let me tell you, when I moved out here to the Northeast, I had never experienced Wawa. This is what this is making me think of. But once I did, I was like, oh boy. This is a whole, like, you think like, okay, it's a convenience store, they got hot food, that sounds great. But how good can it possibly be? Wawa is a whole different animal. That is like top notch. And we have Quick Trip in Minnesota. Quick Trip has some good hot food, but this Wawa is next level. Culver's is number 1 in my area. I love Culver's. In fact, Mace and I tried to make it a point when Adepticon was in the Chicago area to try to hit up a Culver's. Because we're both from the upper Midwest. Roy Rogers sounds like a Golden Era comic book character. Yes. The Adventures of Roy Rogers. Wawa, isn't that a special effect thing for guitars? Yeah, and it can produce hot sandwiches for you. Picture Arby's, but a better roast beef sandwich, and you can get mashed potatoes and baked beans. I'm in. I'm sold. That sounds delightful. Oh, has the Wawa quality gone down? Well, they got me locked in, I'll tell you that. Alright, so listen, speaking of questions in the Discord, I saw some questions about trying to match up your Cities Reforged grass stuff to some Wildlands. The French fries come in a 6-shooter container? Incredible. I was trying to come up with some joke, but none of them were very good. I just want to eat the fries, but that is a delightful vessel for fried potatoes. Anyway, so first of all, I want to talk about the design decisions here. Almost all of Cities Reforged was designed by Aaron. And the reason the grass banks are painted so is just to give them a slightly cooler green effect, mostly so that the warm Tudor stuff pops off of your grass, and when they're built together they have a really nice contrast. Now of course that does make them slightly cooler than the Wildlands warm stuff, so spoiler alert, that's kind of what we're going to focus on here. If you want to match these up, is take some of the cool colors and put them into some of the worm stuff from Wildlands. But there's a couple different ways you can do it, so we'll look at that. And you can it's kind of a range, you can go as far as you want. Now I'll say too, don't feel like you have to do this, because we've been building these out next to each other, and especially once you get a whole build going, you dress the edges, you have minis on it, you have all kinds of stuff, it really isn't super duper noticeable. But of course, for your select, your specific campaign, your build, your terrain, your collection, you may want to do this. So we're going to give it a shot. If you want the grass to match Wildlands, do you really need to paint it yourself? Am I going to have to throw this on top of the 75 pounds of Wildlands I have to paint? I feel you. I held onto my Wildlands for many years. It moved multiple apartments, and it now is in my local game store. I said, listen, if you want to paint it, it is all yours, because I'm not getting any joy out of it. And I've heard that a lot of the kids' campaigns and other D&D campaigns that go on there have been using it, so that is awesome. I had to come to terms with myself and say, listen, I don't think I'm ever going to paint this. So basically the primary greens of Wildlands is a shallow green base, dry brushed with moss green, right? Obviously these are both pretty warm. Now, what's great about this, and it's actually kind of interesting how much of an effect this has, the primary difference between the grass banks and the Wildlands is the base coat is just a half and half mix of shallow green and deep water green. That's pretty much it. I mean, there's a little more going on, obviously, between all the steps. But the primary thing is you have this cooler, darker green underneath. So the primary way to get these to match a lot is to just switch out the base for shallow water green. And then you could even do it completely the same as the grass banks for the rest of the steps, and it's going to look quite a bit more like the Wildlands stuff. Sorry, I'm trying not to sniff into the mic. So I'm just going to get some of these greens out and we'll take a look. I had another, taking these paints home, I had another spill culprit. I sat down when I got in the house and I said, why do my legs have bright yellow spots on them? Well, had a little spillage going on the yellow. Thankfully, I didn't track it all through the house. I looked around to make sure. Because it wasn't until I looked on my floor in the kitchen, I was like, what the heck is that? What is this big bright yellow spot on the ground? And I was like, oh no. I saw it on the bag, saw it on my legs. I was like, oh god. Thankfully, that's pretty much the long and the short of where it ended up. But crisis averted mostly. Oh dear. This moss green is almost out. Please, please give me moss green. This is a fickle bottle. It wants an offering before I'm given paint, given pigment. That is true. Obviously, nature has all kinds of different greens and grasses and colors, throughout. There's some odd colors even that'll show up. A lot of blues randomly, bright reds. So yeah, but I think, if you're really looking for it, it's the hard edges that will maybe make it stick out, but we'll look at how we can deal with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is just paint the shallow green. Now I put this black prime because I'm repainting like from our prototypes. These will be dungeon gray for you, so I might need a couple steps. So similarly to how the base coats make the end result, if I'm not, these might look slightly different just because I'm starting from a really, really dark prime. Now all I'm doing on this palette here off camera is just taking that shallow water green and adding a couple brushfuls of the deep water green. So this is the base of Cities Reforged grass here. So one thing you can do, wherever you kind of want to transition, maybe it's a patchy edge, or maybe it's a certain bank. I'm going to do a half and half bank here. While they're wet, you could even do a little blending right on the piece, right? Get a little more shallow going. Get a little more true deep water green there. And this doesn't have to be neat because you're going to dry brush the crap out of this piece, right? There's going to be a lot of different steps. So, the word wet blending seems kind of intimidating to some if you haven't done it, but it's really not. It's pretty much just, you mix paint on your palette, you can also mix it on the piece. That's pretty much it. So... I was considering too just trying to get this one started like a regular grass bank so you can see. So it looks like it's more of a 3-to-1 shallow water green to deep water green, so it doesn't get super duper dark. So it's a lot closer than you would think looking at it to the Wildlands. It's partially because deep water green is a fairly dark color in comparison, but it's really just, it doesn't take a lot to make that green lean cool in temperature, so. And remember too, a lot of times acrylic paint will appear slightly brighter when it's wet. So this will dry down fairly dark to get even more of this going on here. Yeah, they're also flatter. Right. I also think the cool green kind of gives off a little more of a manicured look. Like a lawn within Civilization might be, you know? Or at least mode. Like when you have that super moist, like wet grass underneath on a freshly mowed lawn. I guess you shouldn't mow when it's super wet, but you know what I mean. If you've ever seen that, a freshly mowed lawn that has a little of the morning dew on it, whatnot, looks like really bright, sort of that cooler green. Yeah, painting Starforge, the opposite of the grass, yeah. Yeah, on the anvil you saw the two next to each other really, you know, you can't quite tell the difference in a large build. The paler edges of the banks, right? Yeah, that could be a thing. But that could also be just a different brush too. I mean, there's so many ways for the headcanon to figure it out, but you could always skip that part. The texture is such that it'll take a dry brush well. You can leave that base coat here. And leave out just the bright spot. But again, I think that it leans into that manicured look that your Tudor village might have. Let me get a little more so we can see the Wildlands version. Let me get a little more of the shallow green going. And then I think I'm going to take this to the hairdryer. As much as we all love watching paint dry, right? I mean, if you want to get the full experience of what a good portion of my job is, just take it all in right here. Watching paint dry. The others in the studio could tell you. Half the time I'm sitting there, you're hearing a hairdryer go. Because of this. Even in batches, if you have a big batch, you know, I don't need to do it quite so much, but sometimes I finish a step on the batch and I'm just blasting the whole table. I mean, I definitely would say they're compatible. I think, like others have said on the anvil yesterday proves it. They're certainly compatible as is. You definitely don't need to repaint them to make them compatible by any means. But if you're just interested and you think it'd be fun to make part of your grass collection a little bit closer to the exact scheme of this, we're going to look at how to do that. Hey, see you later, Nate. Have a good night. And you know what? Now that we have this Cities Reforged grass base coat here, we can maybe even look at some ways to get them to match slightly without even changing the base. Maybe we can just do the same base and have some options here. Oh yeah, definitely. The hairdryer is my favorite hobby tool of all time. Of all things. Just your run-of-the-mill hairdryer. For little minis, big models, terrain, I use it all the time. Alright, I'm going to be right back, guys, and get these dry so we can start having some fun with dry brush and stuff. I'll be right back. I'm going to mute my mic so you don't need to... I don't know if it would pick up the hairdryer way over there, but we'll see. Hold on. It's still a little wet on this side, but this side I've even got darker than this here. This is like almost straight deep green right here. Making sure I don't gunk up the accessory hole there. And so the next step is literally the same as the next step in Wildlands. You just do a dry brush of moss green. And especially if you have a lot of pieces, I would really practice leaving a little extra paint on your brush so you're not rubbing all of it off. I'm just trying to use a light pressure to sort of control the amount of paint that comes off. Just because it'll go a little faster. And you know, it might smudge here and there a little bit, but I think the speed is worth it, and it usually doesn't look so terrible, especially when you have, you know, you put it in a big build. Again, really the only thing differentiating these is that base coat showing through. There's still some wet paint I gotta be careful of, because that'll definitely smudge around. But and part of it too that could be doing it is like there's much fewer, you know, there's not sticks and stuff like there is in here too. Well, if you're trying to match your own stuff, that's a different ballgame, right? Because even if you followed the paint guide based on the factory scheme, I would still say the number one thing to do is to have your stuff that you painted there as a reference. And if the paint guide isn't producing a result that it is exactly as close as you want, you got to start making adjustments and trust your eye and trust your gut, you know? It's the same thing if you're trying to match your factory painted stuff that you already own. It's like, don't go... If you're following the guide and you're saying, something's a little off, there's that slight range of variance, batch to batch, painter to painter, from the factory. So depending on what showed up in the box, you know, I'd rather you use that as a reference point. Yeah, and paint changes color as it dries, so when it goes on, it's going to appear kind of slightly brighter in most cases. And one thing you can do too is, on this moss green step, just go heavier on it. Like, look at, this has quite a bit less, and it's leaving more of that base showing through, and letting the transparency of the moss green show through a little bit. So really what you're trying to do if you're matching wildlands is make these grass pieces warmer. And this moss green is going to be a huge help to you with doing that. Just go heavier on that. So these have the same steps. It's just this has a darker base, and this has even more of the moss green, right? Now, one other difference. A lot of these accent little patches and plants, I have white mixed in. It's shallow green and white. So again, still the same green that's all over wildlands, but that white kind of cools it down and desaturates it a little bit to give it a completely different result. So I'll do that up here. Right now, this one is kind of transitioning from a wildlands grass to a city's reforged grass. Which is one other way to do it too. How about this? You just make a small part of your collection transition. Make some of your floors go from one to the other, just the way we started here, with just a gradual drift in your base coat from the lighter green to the dark cooler green. And then you can lay them out and have a more gradual transition with a pretty small collection of pieces. So that's another way to go too. So this is kind of what we're talking here on Cities Reforged. Now, what do we see on this? Warmer accents, right? So we can use some of that on these. Someone mentioned the light edges. Just skip that then. If that's kind of the thing that's sort of making it seem off to you, just totally skip that. That's one big way to make this a lot closer. Because they'll still look perfectly fine in your city, in your village, right? If you don't want to add that. I don't have all the Picorni colors here at home, so kind of just going rogue on some of the colors. But I'm going off of... This is a factory Wildlands piece right here, so I'm just going off of that. Well, thanks, Frog Hop. Welcome in. Yeah, that's what this normally is whatever I have on my desk, I'm painting. So we just kind of chill and hang out. So this, I'm just pulling off of here. I just have like a straight green from one of my bottles. Go ahead and put that on here. So basically what I'm doing is I changed the base coat. Same second step, moss green dry brush, and now I'm changing the accent patches to a color closer to Wildlands. This green, this little green gray, stuff like that, right? Maybe take some of these yellower patches, right? And just pick your stuff out with that. Especially on these leafy, just use this as a guide and make kind of your own steps, right? These are really leafy plants, so I'm pulling from this leafy color. Now it looks like these actually have the moss green on top of it as well. So you can, we can apply some of that on top of this too. We kind of have a little color like this. I'm gonna take moss green here. This is my own paint, but it's pretty close to lava yellow. Basically, just be inspired by what's on here, right? Gonna get a little more of that moss green. Brush is a little wet, so it's not quite doing it for me here. In a sec. Hey, awesome. Got your first set of DF. Great to hear. Sure, we might have time for that. To do the white edges and take them down. Yeah, that's awesome. Your players will be so pumped. Now, I think one big thing visually that's different, right, is obviously the appearance of brown. Just brown in general being on the piece. Now, this is already pretty good, right? Like, just having this green accent, you know, these even aren't exactly matched up, just factory to my paints. But just seeing that similar color versus one that's not really existent on here is already making it cohesive, right? So that's all I'm doing is just, you know, using a Wildlands piece as a guide and grabbing accent colors. But I'm going to do, you know, similarly, I'm going to start grabbing more of these, especially the browns. You know, if you have something like a base wood or earth stone, that kind of thing. I'm just getting a warm brown, and we're gonna have to get a little creative here with this, right? Just take something leafy, get a brown in there, and maybe even, you know, air quotes, dry out some of the grass, right? Just get some of this in patches on there. Just so that brown exists on the piece, since it does so in Wildlands. You know what I mean? I'm even going to do it on this side that doesn't have the shallow green base. It has the regular base, and even a darker base. But by adding some of these colors that exist on Wildlands, we can make it more cohesive. That's all we're doing, is linking the two together by taking steps, one step or another, and adding it to the piece. Excuse me. Now there's like a lighter brown dry brush on some of this, so you can always go back and do some of that. Right? Just like we highlight with the moss green, we're just doing a similar thing. And now we're really starting to kind of be artistic and creative. Like, this is just, you're salting to taste. See, look at this already. Just by having brown exist on the piece, it almost looks like, you know, if you look up close, you can tell there's not like different sculpts on these patches. But just look at that, right? So you could literally almost just take like this thing, factory, and just like add brown patches. You see that? Trying to get sort of the gloss off camera. We plucked a couple accent colors and we plucked brown off of Wildlands. Such a huge difference. So we're just linking the two by grab and go off of the Wildlands, right? Yeah, so Dwarven Forge has their own paints. For hobby hang, I primarily have, just to keep my collection small here in my tiny apartment, I have acrylic gouache from Liquitex. If you're a hobbyist, you know, and you have, like, you don't have to go out and get this really for any specific reason. I like it because it's available in my art store. It's more expensive, but it's a bigger container. And the reason I do acrylic gouache is because usually art brand paints are satin or glossy, and this makes it matte, which we tend to like in miniatures, right? So it's basically formulated more similarly to a hobby paint, but it has single pigment paints, because I mix a lot on hobby hang, just because I don't want to have a lot of paints at home, because I live with a dog and a partner, and it's in Brooklyn and it's small. So I have like 10 or 11 paints back here that I mix with on hobby hang, so that's why I'm using those. I wouldn't really suggest the speed paints or the transparent contrast type paints on terrain necessarily. But mostly because on Dwarven Forge especially, we do a bunch of dry brushing, so we like to also use kind of chunky matte paints for that. And also, the rocks are slightly different. They obviously both have some base gray going on. Actually, I don't think, though, if I remember right, the Wildlands rocks don't even have base gray. So that's one thing you could do differently. Go to the Wildlands guide and as one option, you don't have to do this, but paint your rocks a la Wildlands. I'm just gonna kind of guesstimate my paint mixture a little bit. But they're basically more brown rocks. I think it's like an earthstone dry brush and maybe caverns on top. But again, warmer than these rocks, which are like gray, base gray, and I think stone edge, which is almost white. It's like ivory. Much cooler than caverns dry brush. This is a little lighter than the earthstone, but it's warm enough that you'll get the idea, right? So I'm doing warm again on my rocks. I think they are usually base coated a little darker, but that's okay. Yeah, those aren't the same at all. But just to get a little separation. Normally I have like all my paints out, but let's see. I just mixed a little bit of this green that's on my palette into some black. So again, we're starting on a warmer base. There's a trend here. The Cities Reforged grass leans cool. All we're doing is switching the cool stuff out for warm. And using the Wildlands piece as a reference for which colors we grab. Well, again, Giant, you can pick and choose steps from both so that some of them, you know, they could both be cohesive with each other. So again, look. Sorry, I'm not really in frame very well. This has two gradual base coats on it. This has the darker Cities base, and in fact even darker to the end. This has closer to the Wildlands base. And look how they're kind of matching up. Because this has accents from Cities, and this has accents from here. So they have elements of both on both sides. Now let's do this. See how they're both pretty cohesive? This has more steps from Cities on the Wildlands piece, But because it's broken up similarly with some brown and stuff, it's cohesive. This is mostly Wildlands colors. But because of this moss green that exists on both, it kind of works. Now on this, you could maybe do accents like this white green to make it even more cohesive over here, right? And again, this is an example of a transition. If you, just by doing the base coat as a gradual shift, if you were to do a straight or something, or a floor like this, you can get them to transition as well. Yeah, that definitely sounds like a good strategy, Froghopp, because then too you'll get used to building with what you have and how you like to use it, and which will give a better idea of what you want to buy next and fill out your collection with. Isn't quite exactly like Wildlands, but it's similar. I'm just mixing now. A little bit of that brown on the rocks. So just by making these rocks warmer as well, it's starting to match up a little bit better. Alright, now I'm going to do some of this light edge stuff. So it's literally just like your shallow green with some white to start. And it's pretty heavy. So the basic scheme is like straight up like this, right? So one option, again, if you want to take this step and use it from Cities Reforged, but adjust it, could always just do a dry brush and lighten your edge that way. So now if you have a really heavy edged bank and you put it next to it here, you just feather it out. Maybe it goes all the way up to almost nothing of the dry brush. You see? Just make a gradual shift that way. Oh no, my brush is mixing randomly. Okay. Now also too, on some of these it's not even entirely perceptible, but some of this color does get lightly dry brushed across the whole piece, which also cools it down. So definitely if you're trying to match this, skip that. Okay? Because that's gonna, the overall dry brush on this is moss green, really warm. This gets a light dusting of this on it, which also shifts the temperature and the look. So I definitely suggest skipping that, or just doing it selectively. Like, because I could see a floor that the edges are kind of a mix of both, you know? Like, the base coat of this piece could be really patchy. And some of the edges kind of go dark, some of them go shallow green. And similarly, you could do this dry brush really patchy instead of lightly dusting the whole thing. Same with your accent colors. Maybe one corner pulls from wildlands, one to cities, so that it transitions. It's all up to you what you pluck from either set. Which steps you pluck. Be a step plucker. We'll even do some of this on here, right? Even on top of the brown, just to make it even more of a transition. I mean, why not? Do this to taste. Now you're really transitioning. Look at the difference from this side to this side. But if you put it on top, yeah, it's starting to shift. But it's not. It is still compatible. That the brown patches really make a big difference. Be a step plucker. Yeah. That's a fair point. Take a look at how much magic costs. Oh man. Yeah, don't worry, I don't spend money on magic anymore. I play Warhammer instead. So I'm still buying a lot of stuff. Yeah, this is a fun step too. Like, you can go as heavy as you want. So now these do get a slight dry brush after the fact. Again, mixing in the moss green a little bit. So all these, like these are pretty easy to transition and shift because the colors exist. The same colors exist on them. It's just in different amounts and in different heavier applications or lighter applications. So this gets some of that moss green to sort of shift it out. I didn't do a very good job of making this gradual like Aaron does, but you know, kind of goes like that. And then these up here, we have some of this. Warhammer where paychecks go to die, exactly. And I got Nate in a Warhammer too. We just played the local monthly 3-run tournament last weekend. So someone asked, like, how do you go back down from here? It could be as simple as going back to your base coat, but keep in mind that it will take multiple coats to get it to like the base coat of these pieces because of transparency and this being a light base. You're a monster? Yeah. Sorry, not sorry. So, I mean, it's a couple things. You could do either like black or black primer dungeon gray and just cover this patch up. That's probably what I do because, you know, it's going to be like black and then the base coat again, or like multiple coats of the base coat, right? So it's like kind of the same amount of coats in either way, but you can't go wrong really with that. I kind of like to go back to basics. If you don't own dungeon gray, you can do just black. If you really want to mix like a little green or brown into the black, just to make it earthy. But honestly, that's what I would do is, you know, this is going to be your light green. You know, I know it sounds like you're basically repainting the edge, but that is what I would suggest because it's not actually going to save you time to try to like shortcut it. it's actually going to be, especially if you use that hair dryers or you do a big batch, just hit that base and then start dry brushing green on it. Because really you just want to get that base dark again. So you can do that with like a special paint mix, but then you're using more of your fancier paints, you know, instead of just like your basic black or dungeon gray. And it's going to take you more coats to get it to look like the base coat of the rest of the piece, since it's so light underneath. But it's going to go pretty fast, though. You know, it's going to go pretty fast because you're doing only a partial piece, and like you don't have to be super neat. It can be kind of patchy as long as you knock down the value, the lightness, the brightness with a darker. You can. Here's what I say: take any dark paint that's like earthy, brown, black, green, any dark paint, and just hit that edge with this. You know, like even if you want to go to the shallow wildlands, the shallow green base, take your deep green first, just to get it darker. You see how it's like patchy and you can still see some of the white underneath? It doesn't even matter. That's why this can be fast. Just if this is whole light edge, just take any dark, almost any dark. I'm sure you have an earthy one, so lean that way. Just go there. You know, make it simple, make it fast. You can dilute it, make it a little thinner so it'll start to dry. And then just start your dry brush. You know? And then from here, if you want to get particular with the base coat, now you're starting from scratch on here. You know? But consider the base on this is deep green plus shallow green, which is a dark green and a lighter green. This is deep water green straight on top of a lighter green. So with this little bit of transparency, it's gonna dry pretty similarly to this base coat already. So if you want to get exact, you can add the extra step, but also consider just cutting that step and go straight to your fun dry brushes and accents. Especially if you're matching it like this. I mean, look how patchy this is. Like, don't even worry about getting the base coat even super exact. This has different base coats, right? You can start doing the fun stuff right on top of this. So really the most important thing, if you're trying to knock off the bright edges, just cut the value, the brightness, with anything earthy and dark. So now you can be selective of like which paint you get down. You know, if it's a green, that'll probably be in your favor if you're trying to get it to match. But basically anything is going to be better than painting straight over that almost white color, you know. That's just paint in general. If you're trying to get something to appear dark, start by, and you're doing it over white or ivory or a light color, start with something darker than you even want to go, and then paint on top of it. Similarly, if you want to go from really dark to really light, paint a coat of white first, even if it's going to be all patchy, because if you do one color and try to do that's light and do it straight over black, it's also going to be patchy. So just get that extra punch by starting with like white, and then start layering your main color, and it will kind of be, it'll actually be faster. But from here, I guess we're kind of just doing like Cities Reforged grass, but eliminating the light base. It's still a little wet up here somewhere. So this is just the moss green again. My brush is a little moist, so it might be a little, but you can get away with it still. Again, especially because this is extra dilute with that moisture on my brush, this is going to appear a lot lighter when it's wet like that. But it'll dry down a little bit. Yeah, it definitely won't be hard. I mean, that's a common shortcut for like a lot of things, right? Like a lot of times we're starting from really dark and we might want to go light, or vice versa. In those cases, consider brown. Brown is such a great medium in color and value that when in doubt, if you're having trouble getting opacity with a color, especially colors that are always finicky with their transparency just because of the pigment, yellow and orange. Need I say more? We've all tried to paint with yellow and orange paint, right? It's a freaking nightmare. How do you do it? Get a patch of brown first, a mid-brown. And you'd be surprised how fast you can get opacity on top of that versus just layer, 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 layer of your yellow. Now, if you're talking about a quick fix, just by testing this with all of you. So this is a lot of times what happens with a Dwarven Forge scheme, or with any of my Warhammer Army schemes or something. It's like, okay, you start doing a test, and you sort of start to get the key ideas or the most impactful points. And then you start thinking about, what are steps I can cut? Like, what are the most important steps? Alright? And now I'm going to leave you in suspense and just finish this up to mostly Cities Reforged banks. So normally this is the step that I would do the edge, but this is the one where we're trying to maybe cut that back. But I'm still going to use it on the plants like the scheme says. Because again, lots of different colors up here in nature. We can still utilize this color as a cool accent to, you know, punch off of the piece. Like we talked about, a slight dusting over the entirety that I am going to do, just to show you something. Oh boy, here we go. Excuse me. Still light dusting. You still see a ton of the moss green, so it doesn't completely eliminate it. Alright, we will even do our rocks like cities. Just gonna mix up a fairly cool gray. While that's drying, we'll do some of our kind of dandelion yellow accents. This is a pretty blunt brush, but I'm going to try to just get away with it. And maybe since we don't have this light edge anymore, maybe we'll kind of hit some of this. This is a new opportunity to accent it a different way, since we eliminated the light edge. That's a fun little patch. Some flowery stuff. Could also be in your forest. Right? I love doing that. A lot of my gaming miniatures bases, sometimes I'll just have like your classic gravel or sand all over the base, or you know, your texture, Vallejo texture type stuff. And I'll just paint patches of grass with just green dry brush, patches of mud and dirt with brown dry brush, and paint flowers by just doing little dots. And it's all the same texture. I'm just like faking it with paint, and I think it looks really good and it's fun to add. So anyway, you try some of that. Alright, so now we got our rocks looking like cities. We're pretty close, you know? We got the flowers looking like cities. Pretty close. So what are the most impactful things that we've done to make them more cohesive with Wildlands? One thing we talked about is the base coat. One thing we talked about is we took away this bright edge. We learned how to do that. But what, at least to me, was the number one thing that we did to make this just right, far away, table level, gamer level glance to make these closer? If you you open up your collection of cities Reforged, you got your grass banks. If you had to do one step, I think we could get away with it in one step. What would it be? I think it'd be this right here. Take out a handful of whatever pieces you want to match or make slightly more cohesive with Wildlands. Just patch it up with brown. Mud, exactly. You can see too, I'm kind of doing a dry brush, but again, it's wet paint. So some of this got a little thicker, some of it got a little drier, which I think is good. It's okay to have that variance. You can push the paint around on the piece. So if there was one step, one takeaway, those of you that are saying, I'm kind of on the fence, is it going to take a lot to change these? I don't think so. Look at that. Look at that. Took me 30 seconds. Do as much or as little as you like. Right? And now it's, look how cohesive it is with both. Because now we have flowers and rocks from here. We can do heavier moss green, and just by having brown visible on there, where it's almost non-existent on a lot of these, reasonably so, it's a lot more manicured. It's looking like Wildlands. Right now, the only color that I took from Wildlands is the brown. And moss green exists on both, naturally, like with the scheme. But the one thing that I changed and took from Wildlands is the brown. So, I mean, there you go. That's the magic ticket right there. If you want one quick fix, add patches of brown. Yeah, you're right, Finley. This should maybe be some kind of video or something. Again, this one has a transitional base coat. You can flip it and it's pretty cohesive with both. So imagine doing this on a floor then, right? Just doing a nice gradient. And that way you can just do it on a handful of floors. Like you can do this on just a select few pieces to have access to for the builds that you're combining these. You don't have to do them across all of your grass banks, because you might want, you know, maybe the ruler or something like the Village, the Duke, or whatever, has the more manicured grass. Maybe you want some of those factory or cleaner, right? And you can do it as little, like this has a little more brown going on. This has slightly less, you know? You can salt to taste, salt to taste. Awesome. I'm glad you find it helpful. Obviously, it makes them more similar, eliminating that white edge, or that light edge. But I think you could still just do a oneer of the brown, even if you took them factory painted with the edge. But again, you saw that step to knock it back wasn't even that long, right? Just a couple dry brushes, or one base to get it back dark, and a quick dry brush. And I really like this. It opened up an opportunity to get this really nice accent patch on there, which is cool. Yeah, that's a good way to go. Get the buildings painted, get the grass unpainted. Yeah. Leave them in your will. And this one I even did, I did kind of a slightly lighter brown dry brush, kind of like this has. This one doesn't even have that. And it still looks great, you know? So if you're kind of sitting there like, I only kind of want to do X amount of work, you know, just cut the steps. it still works, you know? Don't be afraid to cut steps. My Stormcast for Warhammer, it's like I did this really flashy, I think I've shown this on Hobby Hang, the flashy, glowy sunset, like orange sunlight color. And it's so flashy that I looked at it and I said, I don't have to paint a single detail on this thing. I think this has the punch as it is. And I painted an army so fast because of that, and it felt great. So if you're sitting there like, I want to get to it playing with this stuff, just cut the steps. Cut it down to like the least common denominator and have fun so you can feel that sense of reward for, you know, making the progress at the rate that you want to. Cut it in half and double it. Yeah, maybe there's some pieces that you do want to go a little harder on. But for your base level step, you know, try adding that one, and then as you go, you might kind of get inspired and be like, oh, I want to pluck from this, or maybe you'll add this red. You know, there's one step we didn't add, is these red little accents. More of this orangey yellow. You know, you could do all of that. Right? Add a new step. Add a new step to Wildlands, and that you share with this. Add like a purple plant. Some of the Wildlands has like purpley plants. Add that onto some of these, you know? Yes, I leave you this terrain, but only if you will paint it, when I could not. And I really like how this accent looks on here, too. And just having sort of a... So here's another kind of like theory level step 2. These accented patches are all a similar color. These are the same almost. So just by having the accents, not only just by picking colors from Wildlands, but by having them be further apart, if that makes sense, in like value and color right here, makes it look, just by adding a couple small areas that have that range of difference, contrast, it makes the whole piece look more varied, with even though you just did it on a couple spots. So kind of at like a cerebral level, that's why I think these two really work so well, because they're far apart from each other on like the farther apart than these all are, on like kind of the color wheel and the range value. So I say that just because like it's not just like if you want to do it, pick this or pick this or pick this. Use your judgment. You know, this is why we're doing it. We're breaking up the piece visually. This looks very manicured and neat, so we're making it a little more broken up visually. So find creative ways to do that. We did it with different accent colors. We did it with adding a completely new color. We eliminated the edge. We added a new accent. This is all breaking it up visually, which tricks us. It is more varied than this scheme, but by doing it in select small spots, it kind of makes it look more varied than it might actually be. Case in point, the one that we just added one step plus this extra accent. Just by adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 small broken up steps or areas, it makes the whole thing look more broken up, right? Someone was begging you to paint your terrain? That's a good problem to have, huh? Let's put some of my fun skeletons up. See, this is actually an interesting visual too. Like as soon as you're playing on it, I know if you're on the grid, you're usually like, right? But you know, the slight differences start to vanish. So, this I just like had paint on my palette, so I just mixed a random brown kind of, but I was approximating what's on here, which, you know, I pulled from this wood, which is usually like a base wood base, Pocorni base wood mixed with, and then a dry brush with stucco mixed into the base wood. Dry brush. This is kind of like a black brown, and then I think like an earth stone dry brush over it. It might even be just like earth stone mixed with a little black, and then earth stone dry brush on top of it. But this is just an approximation of like earth stone or base wood, somewhere in that range, just dry brushed in patches. And then this one I hit with the equivalent of adding a small amount of Caverns dry brush to it maybe, but any lighter paint that's white, even a touch of white would brighten it up enough for that. Yeah. Like basically, if you're trying to match to Wildlands, just look at that guide and pull those paints. Pull those paints. And some of them might be slight mixes. But pull the accent colors and pull the brown colors. And the rocks, we changed up the rocks. But like I said, you know, this one has, I was mixing, but these are approximately Wildlands rocks that are warmer. But even with the cool rocks, I actually think the cool rocks, again, doing that visual breakup in a nice way, but still leaving it cohesive. So these are Cities Reforged style rocks here, right? But it still is doing a nice job. Yeah, exactly. They could be any color you want. So again, if you're painting these and you're a step plucker, from both schemes. You know, do some of each, right? So these rocks will be warm, these rocks will be cool. As you get used to picking these accent colors, maybe make up some of your own. Like, the big difference between these two is how much they're visually broken up, and it's by design. It's not that one is better than the other at all. But this is a neat manicured look for your grass in town that is maintained, and this is just wild. So it's going to have more visual breakup. So take all of these tips and these things that we've tested and experimented with, use the ones you like, skip some, make up others. It's just visually breaking it up. That's the difference. And if you really want them to be similar, switch up the base coat. But I don't even think you have to if you do some of this stuff, you know? T-shirt, yeah. The hamster logo and step plucker. I'd wear it. Yeah, I'm glad you're sharing this. And what's fun too is I didn't think of any of this beforehand. You know, I just kind of took my reference, you know, either the Wildlands paint guide, the video, the PDF, or your piece in your collection, and just kind of went to town. Used it as inspiration, and then we nailed it down to the one steps that were my favorite to get the impact that I want, that made the result of matching this. So you might come up with other steps that you like better, that you can add just by experimenting with your collection. Now it's creeping back up. Oh, really simple fixes. Not fixes, but, you know, adjustments for a certain use. It don't gotta be hard. It's just gotta be fun. So, that being said, you could get elaborate. You could pick every single color off of here if you're in the mood. You know? But just by adding a single step even, you can get a similar effect. I hope I didn't plug up this hole. No, I did. Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea too, is just make the neat grass into a feature, making the difference between the tiles a feature and making it the point of interest with that sort of grove type thing. Oh, the Oblivion Nexus is cool too. Nate and I use those a lot in our games of Warhammer. Yeah, we got half an hour. Oh, I always have more of these skeletons. I just pre-ordered. He sculpted new ones, actually. I mean, if I had my way, I would keep it to cities. I did pull this. It breaks my heart to like paint over already painted prototypes, but I think we'll do it anyway. You know, we kind of talked about you could make the edge. You know, here's the thing. You could totally like rebase code and get it to match exactly. Or if you just sort of get it patchy, you might like it enough to use it for both, you know. So okay, we learned that we like the visual breakup of the mud and dirt step. So okay. This isn't even the same exact mix, so you can take any brown that you have. So this is an even lighter application, but look how much that does already. So look at, you could do a single corner. Isn't that cool? You could do a single corner and have it start to transition up. You know, if you have like an awkward build, or you know, if you have like an awkward, you could just even do a slight patch, right? Look at that. It's not even that heavy of an application. Look at how that barely exists, right? So we're just kind of dissecting what makes this visually different from that and doing that. And we didn't change the base code or anything. So, and what's neat about it is the reason I personally don't think we even have to change the base code, even though if you point it out, they're obviously different. First of all, this is visual noise that breaks up. You know, we're distracted, so we're not looking for that difference. But this is also that range between the two. It's like a train track. We're going full cities, a little bit of combo cities into wildlands by step plucking one step and barely using it. And then the next step of the track is wildlands, right? But we put that link. Yeah, I just hope that this is one that I painted originally and not one that Aaron painted. I can only hope. Ooh, red Wyverstone sounds awesome. Red base and a green gold interference. That sounds sweet. Yeah, interference is a really interesting tool. Because, you know, we primarily use them to be a flashy color over black, right? But if you think about it, you don't need the interference part of it to do that. If you have like a shimmery paint, like, you know, a Turbo Dork, they make great paints, right? You know, you can get that effect. But what's cool about the interference and why it's so fun to have it in your paint collection, some of you probably heard this if you've watched the stream, but some of you may not know this, is the term interference tells you how it acts in light, behaves in light differently, and the transparent layers underneath. So we all know and love the look of interference paint over black. It looks like the color that's on the bottom, right? Violet interference, it looks like a purple over the black. If you were to do it over a light base like white, the light would hit it in such a way where it looks primarily white, but with like a purple shift. So you can get a whole range of effects with one paint by changing the base coat underneath. It's almost like that pearly effect over a light base. And then over a dark base, it's like bam! It's super impactful. But yeah, so if you have like dragon scales, like you're talking about, imagine kind of like this. We did a base coat that shifts, and if it were go to like really dark to a really light, and it, you know, kind of wet blended across the dragon scales, and then you just hit it with the one dry brush all over, interference, it would look different and behave differently. That's actually kind of a good idea. Should get a dragon and try that. Because it'd be so fast. But then you would get that huge range of variance with just a couple of steps. Ooh, some Fey Wildlands pieces, adding some interference rocks. That's a good idea too. Kind of goes into that glade, fairy glade idea. Take one of your floors, maybe paint up some of these, and then you can put those little mushrooms around in it, right? Let me turn off this lamp to see something. See, look at this too. Also, consider this. right? When we're seeing these in the piece images, we're seeing these on the streams and the videos, when you're painting them at home, you're blasting them with light. You know? Now, I don't know about your gaming rooms, but at my game store and at D&D night, the game store has this low, crappy light anyway. Game night is like atmospheric room lighting, right? So look at how these differences vanish in like more of a realistic light situation, you know? I also do this a lot with my minis, just to see them in different light, because you'll start to see the ranges of kind of like your values and stuff. It's a good way to see your piece differently, to kind of know what to adjust. But like, look how like the differences just super vanish, right? Even this doing less of a transition, you know? So there's also that to consider, and how far you go between. That's why, for instance, you know, this one has like the highlight on the dirt. Yeah, you don't even need to do that. Like, you can't even hardly tell the difference between these two and their mud patches. Look at this, has even less mud. So, you know, that's a step that you could probably skip. And you're looking at individual pieces, right? Exactly. Exactly. So again, you can do as much as you want, but just make sure you kind of have a little bit of a batch going, because you might think, this is a little too XYZ, but as soon as you put it down, half the time I pick it up, I don't even know what I was thinking about. I can't even find the spot that was hanging me up, you know? So just continue the progression, go through the batch, you know? When I'm painting, especially for speed and efficiency, for Dwarven Forge prototypes, for armies, it's a constant practice of telling myself, nope, no, just put the piece down, go to the next step on the other piece. Don't worry about it, don't fix it. You can fix it in a later step. You're covering stuff up with a bunch of other steps. Just leave it. And by the time I come back to that piece, I forgot about it. You know? And I couldn't even notice. I couldn't point you to the mistake I thought I did if I tried. You know? What do you mean, Dinah? This one here? Do you mean like this difference here? This kind of interestingly, accidentally sort of lines up really well too. Yeah, exactly. So maybe you'll do like a 3-edge mud piece to transition, but basically the main thing I wanted to show you is we made a transition with like 10 minutes or 10 seconds of barely any paint. And we did that effect. So you could do it across the whole piece if you want. Like, with how subtle this is, now I wish I almost had a regular bank. With how subtle this is, this could almost just live with your banks. Look at that cool transition. Now also note too, one thing that I can't super control visually is these are prototype prints, so the texture isn't quite as like deep and cut nicely and molded like this texture is, which is going to affect the paint. So I know when I point here, it may not look like super duper exact, but there's also that factor as well. So. But again, let's see. So if you really want this to be super matchy-matchy, you're going to want to do the base coat. Shallow water green. But also, you can just do heavier moss green, heavier on the highlight. Warming it up. You see that? We're even more of a gradient, a little train track from one scheme to the next. Again, that's another 5 seconds. We can keep going if we want. Heavier, heavier, heavier. Alright. You can bring this down even more if you want. Have our little dandelion plants on one side. Pick a different color. If I can get my paint open. Just by adding a couple too, we've added to that train track. So again, you don't necessarily even have to just do one side, you know, to the other horizontally. Maybe this is our heavier side right here. I gotta mix more of this paint. Keeps drying out on me. I don't have the wet palette on my desk tonight. So I typically I don't ever use a wet palette on Reforged terrain when we're doing a ton of dry brushing. And like, it's not like a finicky blending process or mixing process at all. It's just very straightforward when the schemes are all designed out. So I wasn't expecting to use it. I thought I was going to primarily use Picorni, but we got a little more creative with it. But anyway, you know, you can just kind of do like a gradual round. It's really small. Like, look how this is even more subtle right here, right? So this is like a full transition, but to make it so that you can put it in the middle any direction, maybe just add subtle visual separation. Now we kind of have the whole patchy edge, like some of the edges brown, some of the edges, but it can fit into both, basically. See, look how nice where this is heavy brown, but even these more subtle parts, that links them together. So this is heavy on heavy. This is more subtle than this, but the heavier side. It looks good. But even this light side just slight subtle brown. Like you can still see the main previous step underneath, right? But just that slight variation links it. Yeah, I mean, I really also like what the grass banks do for like the courtyard style look, or the grass in general, not just the banks, but that manicured courtyard style look. So, you know, I don't want to miss out on that either. So, you know, I'm glad that they both exist, but thankfully, you know, if you do want to hit this, it's really simple. You don't even have to go hardcore with it. I'm glad you like it. This is a fun discovery for how we can achieve this link between sets. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm glad that we have both, right? And I'm glad that we have found ways, like you said, maybe we'll do video where you can link some of these together. With even, I'm telling you, try it with a minimal set of pieces. Just a few banks, maybe a few small floors just to get the transition going. I think you'll be surprised when you make that train track, that link between them with a small amount of pieces, how much you could do to mix them together, even just with that. And if it's like overly grazed, maybe you are using some heavy brown patches. Oh right, if you see a nice neat patch in the supposedly wild lands, you're like, hey, wait a minute. Something seems off here. It's all nice and neat and quiet. I don't like it. But I'm glad we got this stream in, because speaking of wild lands, I won't be here next Thursday. Maybe Chris will do a stream, I'm not sure, of something else, but I won't be painting. I will be in Ontario, Canada, with no service, on a big old lake, fishing for walleye all day long. And disconnect a little bit. Beautiful landscape up there. I actually will take pictures. Speaking of all the varied greens and stuff, I've taken pictures of so many of the little islands and stuff, because it's just amazing how the like red browns, orange browns, cool greens, warm greens really break it up. And it's Gen Con. I'm not usually on the Gen Con team, one, because they started doing this trip annually, but also because I'm pretty much guaranteed if we go to Adepticon, because I'm like the war game guy. So then others who want to do conventions will get to go to Gen Con. Oh, right. So I guess there are no streams, because Nate will be at Gen Con. I think Tyler will be. So there's not many people to do a stream. You should con your way to PAX Unplugged, yeah. I've heard great things about that one. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the opposite environment, very quiet and not crowded, but I've heard really fun stories about Gen Con too. And it'd be cool to see some of y'all, because I know a lot of you go to Gen Con. Next stream is early Monday. Okay. That's good to know. I'm glad you're in the loop on that. Because I am not. But believe it or not, I have learned recently, just this summer, that you can catch good fish right here in Brooklyn. So tomorrow morning, me and Miles, who I think was on the anvil yesterday, I'm going to take him fishing. So that should be fun. Oh yeah, wrong continent. Yeah. That is a deterrent, I suppose. Yeah. Seeing these like on the camera feed too is a nice way to sort of see the little differences. See, like these all have a different. They all have different adjustments, but they all sort of connect in unique ways visually. That's cool to see. Yeah, so you don't even have to do the same adjustments across pieces. Like, you see the warm rocks and the cool rocks, they're even near warm rock to cool rock, but just by having them in a build together, like having these exist in the build together and these rocks exist in the build together, it makes it a cohesive sort of look. So again, when you're step plucking, if you're matching stuff you've already painted or bought painted, match your existing collection. Look at the guides and the videos and stuff as a reference, as a starting point. But if you notice, like, look how subtle the color shift is. So like you can start to get maybe even just as specific on like the colors of your batch of stuff. And I think that's like a more fun way to do it, as opposed to like, make sure you pour out this paint and you mix it to this ratio, right? Like, that's a great reference and great starting point and a great way to batch paint. But it's fun to start to get creative and be spontaneous with like what you pull from the pieces and how much you add or how little, you know. Just pull the levers, push the sliders up and down. Well, cool. I know we're a few minutes early here, but I think we have accomplished what we want to accomplish here, yeah? If you have any more questions, please feel free to put them in the Discord. Tag me at Hamster, and I will see them usually. If I don't see them right away, I will get to them if you tag me. So make sure you do that. If you're not in the Discord, please join it. As you can see here in the chat, we have plenty of awesome supportive painters in the community. Thank you, Finley, for the link. And you too can be a step plucker like Hamster. Exactly. Yeah, this was fun. This is fun to discover along with you how we can crack this. This is such a good green, this accent that's on here. I like that a lot. But yeah, again, thank you so much for your support in this campaign. Everyone was very, very excited. Has been very excited this week. So we appreciate all your support, all the comments. We're talking about like what people are excited about. So, you know, thank you for your feedback, and just like all your hype is contagious for the studio. So we really love every second of it. So thank you. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you all for hanging out with me tonight. And I suppose I will see you on the other side after Ontario. No, you can be great. It's just practice. Yes. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night. Bye.